واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربنا زدنا علما اللهم فقهنا في الدين. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, we are continuing our hadith from Riyadh al-Salihin. We are on the last hadith of this chapter, the chapter on ikhlas, on sincerity. And this is one of my favorite hadith. It's going to be basically tonight we're going to have a story night with this hadith because it's a beautiful story. Abdullah ibn Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhuma narrated that narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, 3 men among the people that came before you set out until night came and they reached a cave. So they entered it. A rock fell down from the mountain and blocked the entrance of the cave. They said, nothing will save you from this unless you supplicate to Allah by virtue of a righteous deed you have done. So one of them said, O Allah, I had parents who were old, and I used to offer them milk before any of my children or slaves. One day, I went far away in search of the grazing area for my animals, and I could not come back until they had already fallen asleep. When I milked my goats as usual, and I brought the drink to them, I found them both asleep. I hated to disturb them. He didn't want to wake them up. And I also disliked to give to my own children before my parents. My children were crying out of hunger at my feet, but I waited with my bowl in my hand for them to wake up. When they woke up at dawn, they drank. O Allah, if I did this to seek your pleasure, then deliver us from the distress caused by the rock. At this point, the rock moved, but slightly, but they still couldn't get out. The next said, O Allah, I had a cousin whom I loved more than anyone else. And in another version he said, as a man can love a woman. So it's a female cousin. And he wanted to, have his way with her. But she refused. She was hard pressed during a year of famine. So she approached me asking for help. I gave her 120 dinars on the condition that she would give herself to me. And she agreed. When we got together to do it, she said, fear Allah and don't break the seal unlawfully. I moved away from her in spite of the fact that I felt so much passion for her, and I let her keep the money that I'd given her. Oh Allah, if I did this to seek your pleasure, then remove the distress that we are in. The rock moved some more, but they still were not able to get out. So the third one, and the last one. He said, Oh Allah, I hired some laborers, people to do some work for me, and I paid them their wages except for one. He left before I had a chance to pay. So I took his money and I invested it. And I put it in business, and that business prospered greatly. After a long time, he came to me and he said, O slave of Allah, pay me my dues. And I said, all of this you see is yours. The camels, the cattle, the goats, and the slaves. And he said, Oh slave of Allah, don't mock me. Just give me my things and let me go. And I assured him that I was not joking. So he took all of the things and went away. And he left me nothing. Oh Allah, if I did so seeking your pleasure, then relieve us of our distress. And the rock moved all the way out of the way, and they got out walking freely. This hadith is muttafaqun alayh, narrated both Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. This hadith is amazing. This hadith is amazing. Subhanallah. These men found themselves in distress, and they knew to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by mentioning their good deeds. Let me ask you, when is the last time you wanted something so much that you asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by mentioning one of your deeds? In fact, I would guess, if you didn't know about this hadith, you might think we're not supposed to do that. But this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ narrated himself and mentioned that these men got out because they asked Allah by mentioning their deeds in their dua as well. And it's not just the deed. They went into the whole story. They told the whole context. It's like they were talking to Allah. They were, because that's what dua is. You're talking to Allah, so you're asking. It's like they explained the whole circumstance, although Allah knows better than them even what that circumstance was. And the first one's an interesting example because you can imagine, yes, this is a very good deed, right? But it's interesting. What did he do? He always had a habit. He always gave his parents first. He didn't mention that as the good deed. He mentioned that one time they were asleep and I made my family wait before I had the chance to give my parents the drink first. This, my dear brothers and sisters, is probably one of the greatest hadith and explanation for the status of parents in Islam. Yes, we put parents before our children. Is this what we do these days, my dear brothers and sisters? Do we put our parents before our children? I don't know. But this hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to him as a very praiseworthy deed, that he waited not just the whole night, his family is hungry, he's waiting, just to give his parents, not that they won't have, no, just to let them have it first. My dear brothers and sisters, any honor that we give to our parents, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will appreciate this more than we understand. So if you have, goes to the statement that we had, the Prophet ﷺ said, if one or both of your parents are still alive, it's like you still have a way to Jannah through your parents. Allah doesn't mention the same way about children, that if one of your children, there are certain things, for example, we know that, raising, we know the virtues of that, but many righteous deeds are mentioned through the parents. So this was enough to help save them. The next one's very interesting. You would see this and you might not think it's that praiseworthy, but the man wanted to commit zina with his cousin when she was in a desperate need. He was taking advantage of her desperate situation. This does not sound like a righteous person. This does not sound like a righteous person from the sound of it. It's not. These are not righteous deeds at all. But he did have taqwa. He had taqwa that stopped him from completing the sin. And as we learned earlier, if you intend an evil and you stop, Allah records it as a good deed. So he stopped He stopped when it was the hardest. They were about to. Nothing was going to stop them. He stopped himself. She mentioned Allah in front of him, and he remembered Allah and did not continue. This is the proof he had some taqwa. Enough that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala included it with these other men that were also doing very good deeds. So what we learn from this, my dear brothers and sisters, stopping a sin, even if you've walked all the way to do it, even if you've spent all the money to do it, even if you are already in the state that you are about to do it, you are undressed, whatever. If you still stop at that point, Allah will count that as a good deed. So my dear brothers and sisters, I'll give another example. The man who killed 99 and he wanted to make tawbah. He went to someone who was not very knowledgeable and he said, there's no forgiveness for someone like you. So he killed that man too, making it 100. But he still thought, I want to make tawbah. He goes to another man who was more knowledgeable, a scholar. He asked, can I make tawbah? And that man who was knowledgeable, a scholar, he said, and what is between you and the forgiveness of Allah? But you need to change your situation. And the hadith continues. The point is, it's not that you killed 100. Why bother? No. You took all the steps toward the sin. He did many sins on the way. But he stopped before finishing. Stopped before the big one at the end. There's always hope, my dear brothers and sisters. Even if you've already committed the sins, as the man who killed 99, as the man who killed 100. Stop. Allah would forgive you. You have a chance if you stop. The last one is also interesting, it's interesting because of how it happened. It's workers' wages, which is very important, my dear brothers and sisters. If you ever hire somebody for work, it's much, much better that you give them more than their right than that you withhold, because you are more accountable on the Day of Judgment than they are. If you hire somebody, Allah will account you for anything that you've fallen short on giving somebody, because you are the one with the money. So if somebody comes to do work for you, better that they take advantage of you than you take advantage of them, as in one is taking the right from the other. At least if your rights are given up, you are clear before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you take somebody else's rights, you will lose that on the Day of Judgment. And you'll be accounted for far less favorably toward you. So in this case, he didn't just give the man his money later. He invested all of it. And Allah caused that wealth to become so blessed and prosperous. It's a little bit implied in the hadith that the man didn't have, his other wealth was normal. It didn't blossom like this wealth. So he was tested. He could have just given the man the monetary value of what was owed. But he understood Allah blessed it because of this man. So I will give it to that man. Then the man, who you see didn't talk very politely to him. He spoke in a very harsh manner, said, "Oh slave of Allah, give me my rights." As if to say, you didn't do it. Like he went away, he left before taking them, and he comes back angry. So he said, "Give it all." And even then, the guy's angry, like, "Why are you mocking me? Don't joke with me." No, really, all of this is yours. I mean it. So the man took everything. And the guy, in the hadith, he's saying, he took everything and he didn't leave me any. Like, you could have left me a goat or a camel, something. You took it all. You see, I don't have much else. You took everything. Okay, it's your right. Allah, if I give it, I give it for your sake. Okay? Like, he didn't say that, by the way. He didn't say, like, and I wish he left. But you know from the way, he took everything and he left nothing. That's how he said it. Like, you could say he just took everything. But his point is like, he took everything and he left nothing. Meaning, like, I wish he could have left me something. That was sincere. What he did, he gave, that was an example of ihsan in the rights between people. And by the way, each of these cases, it involves rights of other people. Each of these cases involves interactions with other people. My dear brothers and sisters, if you look at our deen, you will find people thrown in the hellfire and people elevated in the ranks of Jannah because of how they dealt with other people. In fact, you find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very forgiving toward anything that is a transgression toward Him. He mentions He is Ghafur Rahim. But if you transgress against someone else, a person, it's on them. Allah cannot forgive you for the crime you do to somebody else. Allah will not forgive you for the crime you do to somebody else. It's the right of the other person to forgive you. And if they don't forgive you, you will have to give them back their right on the Day of Judgment. So my dear brothers and sisters, these men all focused on avoiding the transgression of the rights from other people. The one gave absolute rights to his parents who had the rights. And he did it with ihsan. The other man gave his rights to his cousin, let her keep the money that she was in need of, and did not harm her or take something unlawfully. I had a very difficult situation, I remind you. Even though, like I said, many steps towards the sin, and many sins committed along the way, but not the final sin. And the third one, he not just gave the rights to the man, the worker, he did ihsan with them. He gave them much more than they deserved, but he did it fi sabilillah. This, my dear brothers, is fi sabilillah. This is when we do something for the sake of Allah. That's the proof of our ikhlas. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fill our hearts with ikhlas, to give us that sincerity, to give us that good intention in whatever that we do, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us those deeds that we do. And this, my dear brothers and sisters, is the last hadith in Imam an-Nawawi's Riyadh al-Salihin. From this particular chapter, we will start with Tawbah, repentance, in the next chapter, chapter 2, inshaAllah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the very best in the dunya and in the akhirah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us ikhlas. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help our brothers and our sisters all throughout the world, in particular, especially in Gaza and in the rest of Palestine, in Syria, in the new situation, in Sudan, with the civil war being caused by other Muslim countries. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rectify the affairs of everybody and to replace those who commit transgression and oppression with those who will establish justice and peace. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the very best in the dunya and the akhirah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Jazakumullahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.